it take to win the whole darn thing? Kirby Smart sat down with Chris Lowe from ESPN, and then Jesse Simonton dropped a heat-seeking missile on that conversation that I thought shed some very interesting light on where we are right now when it comes to the college football playoff and the path to a national championship. So we're going to break that down here in just a matter of moments. And y'all, welcome in. Welcome, and they may not be playing college football games, but this show, it's college football season every single day of the week. We are live 3 times a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And today is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, the last one in the history of this planet. So we're glad to have you all a part of this. We're about to have Phillip Dukes on the show. Yes, Dukes the Scoop, national recruiting analyst for us here at On3, host of the 5-Star Flex. He's going to sort of break down the latest in the world of recruiting, because we understand now, college football, a talent acquisition game. Recruiting is the lifeblood of this game. So we'll get the latest from him on USC's heater they've been on. Ohio State taking over the top spot in the On3 industry team recruiting rankings. Georgia, not necessarily in the top 10 right now, but we don't anticipate them to stay outside the top 10. So we'll talk about that in addition to some other things with Dukes the Scoop. Also, got a question, or rather a take from one of y'all, questioning Georgia and their blue blood status. Now, that's kind of a bit of a ambiguous conversation around who's a blue blood, who's not. And so we're going to do our best to attack that head on, and I've got some very strong feelings as to the future of Georgia when it comes to that blue blood discussion. Looking forward to that with y'all. Also, when it comes to the offseason, and the offseason kind of gets a little bit of a negative connotation in the college football public, and I get it, man. Like, college football, when the games are being played, is the best thing on earth. When they're not playing games, we obviously have a little bit less to talk about. But still, the transfer portal makes this thing a year-round game. Recruiting makes it a year-round game. But even with that being said, I think with the right filter on this time of year, we can still make sure that we enjoy college football to the nth degree. So with that being said, who's winning right now when it comes to the offseason? Who's collecting dubs even when they're not playing games? Because college football, those 12 Saturdays, obviously, during the fall are what define you. But every other Saturday, every other week of the season kind of builds into those 12 Saturdays. So clearly we have a lot to unpack here. Bama Spring Intel also going to be talked about a little bit later in the show. We're glad to have you all a part of this. Make sure you're subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. Make sure you're following me now on Twitter and Instagram at JDPacal. I tweeted it out, I guess it was Sunday night, giving one last hat tip to the good folks out of Auburn, Alabama that had us on campus, that allowed us the access they did. We got to talk to Coach Hugh Freeze. That will not be the last field trip we take now. This show is planning to get on the road here as soon as next week. So if you want to be up to date for where we're headed, follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at JDPacal. Man, let's waste no more time. Let's get right to it. What does it take to win a national championship, and who has what it takes right now as we sit here in April to win it all and have that confetti drop on them? Now, the reason we're talking about this, Kirby Smart did a sit-down interview with ESPN's Chris Lowe, touched on a lot of different topics. One thing that they talked about, though, was the changing terrain of the college football playoff path and winning a national championship, what it takes to get that done. And then Jesse Simonton, who is a columnist for us here at On3, covers national college football as well as anybody in the industry, would recommend you following him, dropping heat-seeking missiles this entire offseason and obviously during the season as well. He broke down some of the language they got into within that conversation and basically said, hey, listen, it's a lot harder to win a national championship right now if you aren't one of the first-class powers in college football. So I thought that was sort of an appropriate segue for us to break down what are the key ingredients, right? Because if you want to have the best meal, got to start with what it takes to make that meal. And I think when we talk about the key ingredients to winning a national championship today in college football, number one ingredient is having elite depth. Elite depth. I'm not talking about having just a good starting lineup and maybe having a solid backup or two. I'm talking about when you get into November and you're beat up on the line of scrimmage, you got some soft tissue issues on the skill positions, you're dinged up at quarterback, whatever it is your battleship built all the way through from a roster perspective to where you can keep on cranking and withstand the physicality week in and week out. Because the JanSport era of college football, in my opinion, that's over. Now, what is the JanSport era? For me, Cam Newton was a perfect example of JanSporting a team to a national title. If you know JanSport, the brand, they produce backpacks. Cam Newton put the entire Auburn community, Auburn roster on his back, said, we're going to a national title. I'm winning us a whole deal. Let's go. Like, that was how they got down that year at Auburn. And that's not to throw shade at Auburn. They also had Nick Fairley, who was a dog on the line of scrimmage for them defensively. But you hear what I'm saying. Cam Newton carried them to a national championship. And Jesse talks about that a little bit in his article. So now, where it used to be a 100-meter dash in college football to win a national title, it was 12 games during the fall, win your conference championship. In the BCS era, if you did those things and checked all the boxes there, you played for a national title. One guy could carry you the whole way through. Now, it went from a 100-meter dash to a marathon to winning a national championship. Because not only do you still have those 12 Saturdays, oh, by the way, your schedule in the Big Ten or the SEC probably got a little bit more difficult with those conference realignment plates shifting. You also play your conference title game, and then you pretty much have a whole new season start. Then you have to win 3-4 more games to even have a chance to play in that national title game. So the way the landscape is shifting, obviously, requires a different skill set. Used to be sprint, now it's marathon. And with that marathon kind of approach, the obvious part of that is you're going to probably have to have some different challenges that you overcome. It used to be straight line speed, get there as quick as possible, flat surface, ideal, track for the most part. Now it's you got to run up hills, you got to run at altitude, you got to be good on the downhill, you got to be able to run the turn. Like, all those things are metaphors for me of what it requires now to win in college football, which is essentially just saying you're going to have to play more difficult opponents in that college football playoff stretch. Like, if you were previously in the Pac-12 and you're Oregon now and you're in the Big Ten, you used to probably have to score in the range of like 40-ish a game, depending on what era you were in the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 conference. Again, rest in peace to the Pac-10, Pac-12. But you hear what I'm saying. Now it's, okay, that's great. That was what got it done for you in the regular season. But as you move into the playoff, you're going to have to play those SEC teams that are phenomenal in the trenches. And I'm speaking to Oregon here as an example because the fact they're moving conferences, but it applies to everybody just the same. Like, we saw Michigan last year, the way they won the national championship, it looked different game in and game out for them. And they still had their bread and butter. They had a distinct identity of, we're going to be more physical than you, and that's going to be how we win ball games. Go ahead and see the entire second half of that Penn State game for a teach tape and what they did. But there was also games where, hey, J.J. McCarthy, we might need you to spin the pill a little bit for us to win this game. Hey, defense, we might need you to answer the call to action a little bit more while the offense gets it going. So when you talk about what it takes in college football, you got to be multiple. Long gone are the days of the one-trick pony. You got to have multiple pitches. Now, you have to have your fastball stay your fastball, but again, to win the whole thing, you got to be able to ground and pound one week, score 40 the next week, play in a rock fight the week after that. Like, that's just the way that modern college football is evolving. And so the more styles you can fight, the better prepared you are to win a national championship. Now, I think a subplot within that, and something we saw Michigan do really well last year, and Georgia, quite frankly, the year before, is experience at the wheel. Okay, I'm talking from the staff to the personnel. And when I say at the wheel, I mean more ideally than not, personnel at really key positions. So we're talking head coach, we're talking quarterback with some big game experience. Doesn't have to be playoff experience, doesn't have to be national title experience. I mean, the more big game experience, the merrier. But we talked to J.J. McCarthy during national title media days this year. The first question I asked him, like, hey, y'all have played in a lot of big stages. You played in the college football playoff game last year, played in a college football playoff game this past week. I mean, the Ohio State game every single year for them was more or less an extension of the college football playoff, and just was curious to get his thoughts on how much that impacted them on their national title appearance and eventually the national championship victory. But he was just pretty much straight up with us and was like, yeah, I think experience is your greatest asset as a competitor. Like, that's one of the things that's benefited us the most. And so to distill it down to a phrase here for me, like, I think to win a national championship, you would ideally have an older roster. You would have a coach with experience in a big spot. You have a quarterback with the experience in a big stage as well to give you a we don't flinch kind of gene. And that's not something that you are born with. It's something that you have to earn and work for and, quite frankly, just get experience at. Going back to my whole point here, key ingredient, experience. In this expanded playoff, you're going to have to be able to handle yourself in big spots. Not going to have to, or you're going to have to rather make sure you don't get too high or get too low after that first round playoff victory or after your conference title victory. Being familiar with success, being familiar with pressure, all those things kind of makes you more callous to it. And that's one thing that Kirby Smart talked about with his team. He's like, I want to make sure we are comfortable being uncomfortable. It kind of sounds like us Navy SEAL talk. It's cliche talk. Yeah, maybe so, but I think at the end of the day, it's 100% true. I think it's why we've seen Georgia be as good as they were. Another reason why I think Georgia's going to be a force here this upcoming season, but we'll get to that in a second. So, with all that being said, talking about experience, talking about the right guys at the wheel, I really think that is most important at the quarterback position. And the experience factor is big there, but I think like overall, you need to have a quarterback that has a little bit of that it factor to him. And I'm not saying he has to win the Heisman Trophy. I'm just saying at some point in time, throughout the marathon that this college football season is going to be for a national champion, you're going to have to ask your quarterback to win a ball game for you. He doesn't have to be Caleb Williams. He doesn't have to be the guy who's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. But we saw J.J. McCarthy do this, I thought, really well last year. Folks talked about him being a game manager and kind of dunking on him for doing what Michigan asked him to do, which is another conversation in and of itself. But there were games where it was like, hey, J.J., we need you to throw the football for us to win this ball game, for us to keep that defense honest. Ohio State, great example. The Rose Bowl game against Alabama, threw 3 touchdowns, just doing what was asked of him. So J.J. McCarthy's a good example of this, but I really do think when you look at the previous national championship winners, the quarterback has had a little bit of something to them. Now, Stetson Bennett obviously is a little bit of an outlier there, their first national title for Georgia, and the caveat there, the reason why he's an outlier is because that was arguably the greatest defense of all time in college football. But the fact remains, you're going to have your quarterback in an expanded playoff stretch win you some ball games and be the difference maker for you. So those are kind of the ingredients. Again, to backtrack a little bit, elite depth, it's now a marathon, no longer a sprint. Shout out Drake. Experience at the wheel. You cannot flinch in the big spots. You're going to have a lot of big spots where you have to win in this expanded playoff. Ideally, some it factor at quarterback. I think that's becoming more and more of a non-negotiable. So with those ingredients, who has those on paper right now? It's April. Okay, so if your team isn't on here, doesn't mean you can't get it done, but I do think it's fair for us to sort of, at this point in time, get a gauge for who has the makings of what we're looking for to win the whole national championship. And it's coincidental, I suppose, that FanDuel has these teams as the 4 best odds to win it all as we sit here in April. Your team could evolve into these characteristics. But I think right now, when I talk about Georgia, they check all the boxes for me. And as I sit here right now, I think something would have to happen that is just unfortunate in nature, or Georgia would have to take their eye off the ball for them not to win a national title right now. Like, as we sit here right now, I would predict them to be my national champion. So, again, don't hold me to that. We'll give you our predictions as we get here closer to the summer. But Georgia's deep, got a ton of production back from last season. Defensively, they don't have as much coming back, but they have nothing but 4 and 5 stars in the cupboard. They have a quarterback who has now had a full season under his belt. And you watched Carson Beck play last year, man. It was just a slow but sure takeoff for him. Like, even Kirby Smart said in that interview with Chris Lowe, hey, we probably should have let him cook a little bit more early in the season and kind of taken the governor off of 15. He didn't say let him cook, but we're going to say it right here on this show. Big stage experience. They're better for having played in the SEC championship and lost. Kirby Smart's been to multiple national titles, has got 2 on his mantle in terms of national championship hardware. I have the least amount of concern for what I know about Georgia as we sit here in April. Now, Ohio State, I think, kind of checks a lot of those same boxes. Defensively, you have probably the least amount of question marks with them because of the fact they bring pretty much everybody and their mother back on defense. Sprinkle a little bit of Caleb Downs on there to make that defense even more elite. The big thing with them is how those transfers mesh. Quinshon Judkins, what does he bring to the table? Will Howard is the obvious hinge point for them. Does he get them over that hump that Kyle McCord kind of maybe wasn't able to get them over that hump? You lose Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think Jeremiah Smith will ball. I think Carnell Tate will ball. Emeka Egbuka is a 1,000-yard receiver. You hear what I'm saying. The boxes are checked. The experience factor, the depth, Ohio State has that. I'm a little bit curious about Will Howard. Not that I have doubts, just curious, but that's where I stand on Ohio State. Think they're absolutely one of those teams that has the ingredients. Texas is really fun to talk about right now because on one hand, you bring back your quarterback. You got a head coach who has proven he is, in a lot of ways, got the materials to be a builder in college football. I'm talking about roster. I'm talking about culture. Inherited a team, and they went 5-7 his first year. Things happen on that roster, a lot of churn. He goes to the portal, gets some guys, Adonai Mitchell being one of them. They go out and win the Big 12, their last season in that deal, and go to the college football playoff, a play away from playing for a national championship. The bottom line here is I'm curious about, for Texas, how do they do with these this next evolution. Because last year was kind of this peak. If you were to graph the Steve Sarkisian era, it was kind of the slow trend up, 5-7, 8-4, Big 12 champs, college football playoff berth. But when you talk about Texas next season, a lot of the pieces that were responsible for that peak, production-wise, you look at the numbers and Texas brings a lot back, but I keep saying this, you lose almost 2,000 yards receiving and Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. How many times did those dudes make massive plays for you? In the interior, you lose 2 All-American defensive tackles. That's going to matter when you talk about this college football playoff conversation. So they're top 25 in returning production. Again, statistically, that makes sense. Quarterback's back. They meet a lot of the prereqs for me when it comes to winning a national championship. So for Texas, I'm putting them in the class, but how they do that first semester in the class and how they do that, overall grade perspective, we're going to find out. But I think it's very fair to say they check a lot of boxes, and I think they're absolutely in that conversation to be a national title contender, a legit national title contender in 2024. Now, the last team here is they have the 4th best odds, according to FanDuel. They're pretty transfer heavy at some key spots. Evan Stewart, coming over from Texas A&M, top wide receiver in the portal. Dylan Gabriel, going on his 73rd year of college football. We love it. We love to see it. We're big DG stands on this show. Full transparency. He's going to be running the show. So you got the experience, the it factor. You got, I think, a level of experience with Dan Lanning having played in the Pac-12 title game. I think that matters. I'm just curious about Oregon. The question for me with Oregon is, are they ring material? Are they ring material? That's kind of a question you ask when you're in a dating relationship, right? Like, you like the idea of someone, they check a lot of boxes, you can see how it could work out in the future. And I say the same thing about Oregon. Dylan Gabriel, I would not be surprised if they won a national title with him running the show, with that roster, with that depth, with what they have in the line of scrimmage. There's a lot of things that make sense about Oregon to me in a national title conversation. But when I walk it all the way through, when you walk it all the way out, are they ring material? Is there the experience that they need to have to go on a run they're going to need to go on to ultimately win a national title? To me, I think they're a contender, and I'm excited to watch what they do long-term there. So what does it take to win it all? A lot of layers to it, but regardless, the beautiful part about college football, man, we eventually get answers in the fall and into January. But those, to me, are the key ingredients. Those are the teams that I think right now are legit contenders in the college football landscape. Moving right along here. Hey, make sure you've liked the video. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel. Very, very happy for everyone tuned in right now. We're very, very grateful for everyone tuned in right now is probably a better way to say it. Going to be joined by Phillip Dukes here in just a matter of moments, talking everything recruiting, talking about Georgia and the way that they're operating right now. He's got a great video right now on the On3 Recruits channel talking about that, talking about Ohio State's heater, USC's heater. A lot happening in the college football recruiting world, so excited to have Phillip Dukes on here in just a matter of moments. Let's move right along here, though. Who's winning the offseason right now? Who is a winner when it comes to the offseason at this point in time? Because offseason has kind of become a negative term. When we talk about college football, it's kind of become this thing where you flinch a little bit here and it, and people like to say no offseason, which, hey, I agree with. College football does not take a break by any stretch of the imagination. But even so, I think it's fair to define this time of the year as an offseason. But who's winning right now? Because we understand now those 12 Saturdays, that's what defines your college football season. That's what defines your team and your overall product, your output. But a lot of the input is going on right now behind closed doors. Tell you what, national championship trophies are being won during those 15 spring practices. It was won during winter conditioning. Like it's a beautiful thing, the way that college football is kind of a year-round life cycle. So with that being said, talking about some winners in the offseason, it's very difficult for me to sit here right now and tell you Ohio State is not the offseason winner. The offseason national champion, I think, is what Jesse Simonton has an article on over on On3.com. Again, shout out to Jesse Simonton, just producing absolute bangers week in and week out. Ohio State, here's kind of the laundry list of what they've done over the course of, the last 6 months or so. A couple days ago, they land running back coach Carlos Locklin from Oregon. I think anytime you bring a running back coach within the conference over to your school, also a high-profile school like Oregon, I think that matters. That's a win. Number one recruiting class currently, as we sit here live on the air, in the class of 2025. All right, Ryan Day, I know it's early. Ryan Day's not playing with y'all, man. Right? Ryan Day's not messing around here. They're acquiring talent. 5-star quarterback in Julian Sayin from Alabama. A little short-term signee action. Bring him over to Columbus. Quarterback room is packed. Hey, what's one more dude in there? What's one more guy added to the room there going on with Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Nolan, and oh, by the way, Will Howard, who you also landed through the portal. So not one, but two high-profile quarterbacks through the portal. Also, speaking of the portal, you got the number one player in the whole darn thing, in Caleb Downs from Alabama, All-American freshman. I mean, if his tape is his resume, he's getting any job he wants in the country, is Caleb Downs from what he did last year at Alabama. Then you bring over the Big Ten head coach, Chip Kelly. Yes, Big Ten head coach Chip Kelly at UCLA. You bring him over not to be a head coach. You bring him over to be your offensive coordinator. Talk about a win. That's a massive win for Ohio State. And cherry on top is you have the number one recruit in the entire country. You kept him committed, got pen to paper in the class of 2024 with Jeremiah Smith. This is a team that went 11-1 last year. 11-1. So they just did all those things, and you're telling me that's not enough to get one more win. Now, that one more win's been a little bit elusive in terms of, beating Michigan, so we understand that. But Ohio State, we'll see what happens on the field, but I don't know that you can have a better offseason than what they've put together right now. Oregon, also a massive, massive winner to this point in the offseason. They've secured not one, but two top 5 quarterbacks through the portal. Dante Moore, little security for the future. Dylan Gabriel, 6-year, no problem. Let's get it done out here in Eugene. Also, they secured the number 4 player in the portal, someone for Dylan Gabriel to throw the football to, and Evan Stewart. And they kept their head coach from taking the Alabama job. This has really flown under the radar because of all the noise around other guys that didn't take the job as well, and around Kalen DeBoer taking the Bama job. But, when Dan Lanning released that promo video of him saying, I'm staying right here in Oregon, saying, hey, if you are worried about your head coach leaving, come play for us. You know how much of just a headline that was for everyone in the college football landscape, that Oregon's going to be a factor, not just this upcoming year, but as long as Dan Lanning's there? Because if Dan Lanning's not leaving for the Alabama job, what job is he leaving for? You know what I'm saying? So that was a massive win. Oregon, I think it's very difficult for me to say they weren't a winner to this point in the year, in the offseason. Now, the pushback we'll get on this is, well, they just lost their running back coach to Ohio State. That's a big win for Ohio State. It's a loss for Oregon, no way around it. But I will say this, I think Oregon is a high-profile enough school. I think that job is going to be coveted by a lot of big names, and I expect Oregon to, in the long run, be just fine. Miami, I think they're a winner without question. I mean, you look at what they did and the work they put in, as Josh Newberg would say, recruiting through the whistle to take Cam Ward from declaring for the NFL to bringing him back to school. Look at him here, just sitting back playing darts out here in spring practice. If you're listening on podcast, we're throwing a little bit of B-roll of Cam Ward, just throwing some routes on air, but a little bit of routes on air, enough to get the folks in Coral Gables excited, and I don't blame them. Cam Ward changes the entire complexion of how you view Miami in 2024. Think about how differently you would think about Miami if you had Tyler Van Dyke coming back or Emory Williams coming back to be your starter next year. Emory Williams obviously coming back, but you hear what I'm saying. You would say, okay, I see potential. I see, a way for us to be successful with them. Maybe we can win 8 games, 9 games. With Cam Ward, you're talking about winning the ACC. And that's not to dunk on anybody else that's in that quarterback room or was in that quarterback room, but we understand now Cam Ward is just a different caliber of player. So for Miami, I think they're a winner in the sense that they even landed Cam Ward. I think that, to me, enough is enough to make them a winner. Last school to talk about here, Ole Miss. In terms of what they kept, Trey Harris, more or less a 1,000-yard receiver a year ago in the SEC, had 985 yards. You kept your quarterback, Jackson Darty. I know his name is Jackson Dart. We call him Jackson Darty on this show because it's a party in Ole Miss during the day when they're playing. They re-upped with Lane Kiffin. I've said it many times. The fact that you kept Lane Kiffin in Oxford, I think is best for everyone involved. Lane Kiffin isn't for everybody, but he is for Ole Miss. Ole Miss champions Lane Kiffin the way that he does things. Lane Kiffin also doing Lane Kiffin things, landed a top 3 portal class, which includes the likes of Juice Wells, who is going to be, it's going to be Batman and Superman out there with Trey Harris and Juice Wells on the field together at the same time. And then also, they went and landed some big boys on the defensive line, like big-time playmakers that you've been missing in Oxford for a little bit now. Walter Nolan, Princely Uman-Mielen. It's a dangerous recipe up front. To have that up front and then an offense that you feel pretty confident is going to score north of 30, 35 points a game, Ole Miss is very, very real when it comes to their aspirations to win the SEC. Like, there's a reason now there's some extra buzz in Oxford. There's a reason there's a little bit of extra hype right now. It's because everyone sees what they're doing and what they have on paper right now and the way they've built this roster via the portal and what they have. it's exciting. It looks like it's going to do some really good things. So the pushback there is, hey, well, they lost Quinshon Judkins. I just have a feeling that they're going to be okay without Quinshon Judkins. That's not me taking anything away from Quinshon Judkins or speaking ill of the kind of player he is. He's going to do great things at Ohio State, but I think Ole Miss offensively will just be schematically advanced, and they'll be good enough to score at the clip they want to score at with all the weapons they have. So a lot of winners so far this offseason. Might be something to revisit after the spring, but regardless, college football, year-round sport, those are the teams that are winning right now. You know who else is always winning? You're winning if you are subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel. This is the On3 YouTube channel, but if you're subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel, that means you're watching episodes of The Inside Scoop with Josh Newberg, the Wilt Fong Whip Around, also new to the On3 Recruits channel. You're winning if you're watching that, and you are definitely winning if you're watching the show hosted by my man, the man, the myth, the legend, On3 national recruiting analyst, 5-star flex host Phillip Dukes. Dukes, how we doing, baby? You got the A on the hat there, man. You looking good.
Yes, sir, man. The Braves been on the heater lately, right?
Have they? Okay, see, I don't even know. Like, I have a 47 hat for the Braves, and I wear it occasionally, and then folks ask me if I'm a Braves fan, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I like the hat, but I mean, I'm from Atlanta, I guess, but I don't know if I can claim them the same way, man. Hey, speaking of heaters, Ohio State, I mean, they're now the #1 class in 2025. What's gone into what they've done over the course of the last, I guess, 7 days, landing 4 commits in 3 days over the weekend? What's going on in Columbus, and why are they so successful right now, Dukes?
I think it's just the fact of the aggression that they put in, that you started to see at the end of the transfer portal. The time is now. Harbaugh's gone. You can't lose to Michigan this year. And I think that it's a perfect storm for Ohio State recruiting. You got the development there. You've also been able to prove that you're going to win. You just haven't been able to get over that single hump. So now we're saying, you know what? We are taking all our arms, all our forces, and we are loading up to make sure that we don't lose that game this year. And if they win that game, then they're in the college football playoff. Well, even last year they would have been. But this year they win that game and everything changes at Ohio State. You've got everything. You've got the quarterback. You've got the receivers. You've got multiple running backs. You've got offensive line. You got probably the best defensive player in the country on the other side. There is no reason to not want to be a part of what Ohio State is building right now, and I think they're capitalizing on that on all cylinders.
One of the things that I love so much about your show, again, the On3 Recruits channel, 5-star flex, get dialed in. You're talking to some of the top guys in the country, and so the fact that you're so plugged in and giving us, extra intel outside of just kind of the headlines of, oh, he's taking a visit here. What are folks saying on the recruiting show, or what are recruits saying, rather, about what Ohio State's doing and why they're so attractive right now?
They said it's a vibe in Columbus. To quote the young people, they say it's a vibe. When you go up there, it feels like winning. It feels like winning football, and it feels like championship football. And not even to mention when you think about the receivers, wide receiver U is the first thing they always say. But I'm consistently hearing that Columbus is a place that you have to get to fully understand. And that's why you're seeing guys go for multiple visits. And they're not just recruiting in the Midwest. They're recruiting Texas well. They're recruiting out. Naeem Alford is from Alabama. You think about the guys from Georgia who are traveling up to Ohio State. And a lot of times when they get there, they want to commit because it's truly what they call a vibe. And the championship culture is permeating through the walls up in Columbus. And they're being very successful right now.
It's a vibe. I love that. I mean, I feel like that's got to be on a T-shirt if you're Ohio State. Like, throw that there with, like, the script I on the it's a vibe. I don't know. We'll read.
That's hard. I like that.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just thinking here.
Yeah.
If you're Ohio State, if you're watching, hit us up. We'll talk some ideas. Speaking of heaters, though, man, the Braves, Ohio State, and USC, like they've been cooking. It seems like not just the in-state guys. Like, they've gone into states like Georgia. They've gone to Texas. Like, they've got a pretty national reach right now. What's the buzz around USC, and what's the reason for their heater as they're currently the number 3 team in the On3 industry team recruiting rankings for 2025?
I think they're recruiting with a phenomenal sense of urgency right now. When they get people out to LA, they aren't letting them leave without a commit. When you look at guys like Justice Terry, who was viewed as a Georgia lock this whole cycle, ever since he committed to Georgia, he's always been like a Georgia guy that you never thought was going to get out of Georgia. That was a huge surprise. Then you look at a guy like Isaiah Gibson, who's rising up the rankings and could end up being a top 10 player in the country based on how he performs this year. he commits as well. And then when you look at those two guys specifically coming out of the state of Georgia, a lot of people are saying, well, that commitment isn't going to stick. They're going to have to fly over Georgia, over Alabama, over Auburn, over Texas to make it to LA. Now, that's the same thing that was said last year about a guy by the name of Cameron Fountain from Booker T. Washington High School. He was an edge top 50 player, and nobody thought that commitment was going to stick, but it did. And what they do is they recruit relentlessly, and now you've got a guy like Eric Henderson out there who's coached probably the most generational and transcendent defensive player in our generation in Aaron Donald, who, like, how much more can you give to a guy when you talk about development and saying that I helped Aaron Donald become who he is? He's basically Thanos on football, and if you're an Avengers fan, that's the guy whose team you want to play on.
I love that, man. Between It's a Vibe and the Avengers references, like, hey, we're cooking. We're cooking right now, dude.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of vibe, man, like, if you get out to USC and you get to feel the 75 and sunny and it's like February where you go back home and it might be a little bit more chilly, I have to believe, like, that's attractive to recruits. With this new staff, too, you mentioned Eric Henderson, Danton Lynn. Like, is that pedigree factoring in with these, these defensive players deciding, hey, I want to go play at USC and giving their commitment over the likes of a Georgia or other big-time powers that are, maybe a little bit more of the hot commodity defensively right now?
I'd say there's more opportunity. Guys on the defensive end at USC are absolute necessities. At Georgia, there's a stockpile of talent of 4- and 5-star guys. If you look at how USC is recruited, they go to the Southeast specifically to try to get these trench monsters. So when you think about it, you go to USC, you're almost a guy day one. At Georgia, you're going to have to bide your time, and they're selling it. And then you also think about guys who think about life after football. If you become a star in LA, you're always a star in LA. So you think about the lore that goes along with the Trojan football out there. If you're a legend on the field in Southern Cal, you're a Hollywood legend, which is a little bit different than being a Southeastern football legend. So there's a lot of things to sell, and especially when you got guys who are thinking about life after football, maybe they want to be in entertainment. Well, what better place to get your start than LA?
Yeah, a lot to offer out there in La La Land. I mean, that's a really good point for these guys that think about wanting to get into sports media. You got Fox Sports down the road. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out. You mentioned Georgia, Dukes, in terms of some of these guys that are getting out of the state. Georgia right now, I mean, it's so early before the early signing period right now, but like Georgia's sitting at number 13 in the industry team recruiting rankings. What do you make of where they're at right now? And you have a great video out on Kirby Smart right now on the On3 Recruits channel. What do you make of where they stand right now for the long haul?
There's a quote that I heard Kirby Smart say before, and that's in reference to a couple of years ago, there were some players that were sitting out of spring in a precautionary kind of phase. And he said championships aren't won in April, they're won in December. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to recruiting. Right now, you may see Georgia at 13, but they're just biding their time. They're letting everybody, do the whining and the dining. But then Big Daddy comes home at the end and they say, hey, we need you. We've been talking to you the whole time. What's it going to take? We're going to recruit the heck out of you. And do you want to be developed? If this is the place that you want to be, look at the season we're currently having. And then Georgia does a really, really good job of using their current success and current recruitments. So as the season goes on and you watch Georgia beat somebody else and they beat another top 5 team and now they're 9-0 and they're 10-0. Now that conversation sounds a little bit different, like, hey, man, you see what we're doing right now? This guy just played himself into the NFL. We need you. And I think that plays a big role in how they seem to always come in so hot and heavy at the end.
I think that's a great point that I don't know that gets enough buzz is like, the National Signing Day in December when Georgia's getting ready for college football playoff game where they're playing in the SEC championship, which I think it's actually going to be the week of is when the new national signing period is going forward. Like, it has to matter. If I'm 17 years old and I see my team that I'm having an offer from, about to get set to punch their ticket to win the SEC or play for a national title, like, I know it's the expanded playoff, but regardless, I think the success and what you mentioned there is a massive factor, and I'm curious to see how that impacts guys going forward. Notre Dame, Dukes, they've gone to work, man. They got 19 commits right now, the top 5 class the number 5 class rather in these current industry rankings. We've seen Notre Dame start hot before, but then, kind of what we just talked about with Georgia, the cycle wears on a little bit. Guys stay committed. You hear verbiage around, well, I got to make a final decision. For Notre Dame, is there some extra confidence that some of these commitments they have right now are going to stick? Or what's the overall buzz around Notre Dame right now?
I think it's that Notre Dame just has to stay the course. They've proven themselves to be a program on the rise. Marcus Freeman is a heck of a recruiter. I think it's going to be really important how they continue to recruit Deuce Knight. He's the linchpin of that class. When you think about a guy like Derek Netto's, a 6'5" receiver, somebody who could be that battery mate for Deuce Knight, I think if you can build your class and keep those two in, then the rest of those guys will probably honor their commitments. You're going to lose some. Anytime you have, there's the law of numbers. And when you have so many early, it's almost going to be impossible to keep all of them. But you're going to add guys as well. But I think the key is to keep the anchors together. Make sure that you got Netto's and Deuce Knight. And then if you add a guy like Gavin Nix, you get a guy like Mark Zachary, when you start to add these top 100 type guys, now you start to realize, like, hey, this class wasn't just a top 5 class on paper. This is a top 5 class in December.
And what's your opinion on this? Because I know Notre Dame, they want to get the guys on campus a little bit warmer in South Bend. Like, hey, come out for spring. Come check out the camp in the summer. Come check out beautiful South Bend. It's like 75, 80. And then they come back for a game in the fall or in December, and it's like, hey, coach, it's like 20-something degrees. It's 30-something degrees. Like, that's not what I committed to back when it was, sunshine and rainbows out here. Do you have an opinion on how you structure a visit schedule for a kid, or do you see anything that would be relevant to Notre Dame fans? And I don't pretend to know exactly how they've done it with this class right now, but do you have any opinion on that with Notre Dame?
I think it's important to kind of restrict your visits to huge games. And especially your ones from distance. The guys who are, when you recruit Florida guys, you want to have them at a game where there's a lot of juice. So last year, that probably like an Ohio State game where everybody, the national games are the games where they're going crazy in South Bend, where even though if it's cold, you can't even feel it. A couple of years ago, I was at the Auburn, Texas A&M game, Cadillac Williams' first game, and it was so cold out there. I think, and for us, 30-something degrees is cold, right? Sure. But the energy almost warms you. People like the swag surf. Every 5 minutes, somebody's jumping around, and we're talking about on a game that scored under 20 points total. But the energy in the stadium was able to heat guys even though they were cold. And I think it's the same thing that Notre Dame has to do, is make sure that guys are at those really big-time, high-leverage games where there's a lot going on, a lot on the line, and a lot of people there. There's always a lot of people there, but the energy isn't always the same. You got to have them at those high-energy situations, and I would restrict it to those. So maybe I would only have major recruits at maybe 2 or 3 games.
So bottom line, we get some swag surfing going in South Bend. Like, we might be able to keep some of, it could hurt things. A little bit of swag surf on top, get the rocking back and like, hey, it could do it, right? That's all we gotta. We got to implement that, it sounds like. Dukes, best in the business, man. Anything else you're watching? Anybody else that, could be making some moves here on the whether it be a player or teams that you're watching closely when it comes to these rankings?
I like Auburn right now. What they're doing, the way they're stacking their class. Now you're starting to see them make more moves on the offensive line, which has been their Achilles heel years past. I think this is the year that Auburn finally gets over the hump and gets one of those top 5 type offensive line hauls, and that would probably change the trajectory of where Auburn goes as a whole. They've always had skilled guys. You always got receivers. You always got DBs. But Auburn has always really lacked at the offensive line, and this is the class to do it. When you look at a guy who's already committed in Tavares Dice, they're really close to Broderick Schull. You've got some guys that they're close on, and there are some guys with optimism about Michael Fasusi. So if you can land some of these top guys, you still got Josh Petty. Juan Gaston is someone who's really coming around. You could see them dip back into Georgia and try to pull Braden Jacobs, who's a 2-time legacy. His mom and his dad both went to Auburn. So when you see these type of guys where Auburn can really get that type of class, I don't care if Auburn is top 11, top 10. As long as their offensive line class is top 5, I think that'll be like a huge win on the Plains this year.
Hey, you told us, too, we went down there last week, and you're like, hey, bro, the Wall Toast Performance Center, it's no joke. I was like, yeah, okay, I can't wait to see that. It sounds awesome. We walked in, and I was like, Dukes wasn't kidding. Like, this place is a rocket ship. So if I'm a recruit and I step foot in that thing, I'm like, all right, this is big-time football. But, Dukes, you're the man, bro. I appreciate you making time. Anything we got on the 5-star flex you want to let the people know about? Anything that they need to be on their awareness game for?
Yeah, just when you see some of my videos, if I'm breaking down your school in recruiting, or if I'm not breaking down your school, leave a comment on a current video that I have and let me know who you want me to break down, and I'll go there next.
The People's Champ, baby. The People's Champ, host of the 5-Star Flex, national recruiting analyst, the mayor of College Park, Atlanta, College Park, Georgia.
Yes, go.
Phillip Dukes. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, man. Thank you, bro.
That's the man, Phillip Dukes. Again, follow him on social media, Twitter, Instagram. I believe he's Dukes the Scoop on both of those platforms. Doing a phenomenal job over there on the On3 Recruits channel. It's like, I mean, it's the Monstars over there. Josh Newberg doing his thing. Phillip Dukes doing his thing. Steve Wiltfong, like, I would just say get a membership. Get a membership. You don't have to get a membership. It's free. It's free $99, baby. Get a subscription over there. Subscribe, rather, to the On3 Recruits channel. All right, rolling right along here. So March Madness is rolling. Dave Doran saying, hey, NC State is not a basketball school, and then they ended up having two Final Four schools, both men's and women's in the Final Four, I believe. But I know y'all want to watch those games, so Prime Video is allowing us to do that together, okay? So need to sneak in those tournament games while at work. We all do. Prime Video has you covered. Watch every game live on your phone or laptop, or just relax and watch at home with Prime Video with a subscription. Prime Video gives you choices to add on channels like Paramount Plus and Max, both featuring March Madness tournament games, so all in one place. It's March, it's Madness, it's April, it's still Madness. It's all on Prime Video. All right, watch all of it there. We appreciate Prime Video for taking care of us and ultimately taking care of the people a part of this entire operation. I see some of y'all in the live chat letting us know that you are interested in more college football talk, and we appreciate you for that. So let's move right along. Let's keep talking about college football. We did a massive, massive spring intel show yesterday, so we went from places like Auburn to Georgia to Florida to Florida State. One school, though, that we didn't hit on yesterday that I want to hit on right now, Alabama Crimson Tide, man. New era with Kalen DeBoer out there running the show. There's a lot of talk around what they're doing differently. The private school has taken off the uniforms, okay? They are now playing music at practice. We got media access. So what is the latest, as we can tell, out there in Tuscaloosa? Get a membership at Bama Online. We're going to go through some high notes right here, but if you want up-to-the-minute intel, Tim Watts, crushing the game. Okay, crushing the game. Travis Ryer, crushed. Clint Lamb. I'm telling the Monstars over there as well. So get a membership to Bama Online to stay dialed in to all things Alabama football. From what we can tell when it comes to spring practice, according to the folks that we're talking to, there is a bit of an evolution going on within the offensive line. Now, when I say evolution, I mean their bodies are changing, all right? We used to be a little bit more of a let's be big, bad, strong enforcers. They still want to be enforcers. They still want to beat the living daylight out of you physically. But what they're doing now is they're changing the body type a little bit, okay? So maybe we were 330. Let's get you down to 315, 310. Maybe you were a little bit heavier than that, dropping some weight. The reason for that, with Kalen DeBoer's system, he wants to get those guys out in space, both playmakers and linemen. He wants to do the pin pull. He wants to do the power. He wants to have the screen game going and get elephants on parade, as we would say, with the most admiration for those big boys running the tunnel screens. We want to have our big boys be athletic so we can attack every area of the field. And so what Kalen DeBoer is doing here is obviously trying to tailor his personnel behind closed doors to get that done. Now, I'll tell you this. One, I like this. I think this is a good move for Alabama if you want to run Kalen DeBoer's system, which obviously they do. And the other part of this is I love that Kalen DeBoer is saying we're going to do things my way here, baby. Like that was one of the key things we have said here since he got the job is like you hired Kalen DeBoer to be Kalen DeBoer. You didn't hire Kalen DeBoer to be Nick Saban. You hired Kalen DeBoer to do his thing. And so he's not tippy-toeing around, well, how did they used to do things? How'd y'all run it last year? He's like, listen, I'm 104-12 as a head coach. I know what I'm doing. I haven't coached in the SEC, but gosh dang it, if I don't swing my sword here a little bit and go in with what brought me here, dance with the one that brung you, one of our favorite phrases on this show, Kalen DeBoer, it looks like by how they're developing their offensive line, currently dancing with the one that brought them, moving the offensive line to a little bit more of a speed offensive line, if we could say that. Speaking of the offense, though, Jalen Milroe, a lot of questions for us on this show. Hey, how's he going to fit with that system? Hey, there might be some guys on that roster that throw the ball a little bit better than Jalen Milroe. The return so far out of spring practice is he has been consistent. He's been consistent. It's a key word now that you didn't always associate with Jalen Milroe. That's not throwing shade. That's just calling a spade here, baby. Like Jalen Milroe, if you just knew without a shadow of a doubt, as an Alabama football fan, you were going to get his B-plus game every single game. I think most Tuscaloosa residents would say, yeah, that sounds good to us. We'll take B plus Jalen Milroe. And guess what? You get B plus Jalen Milroe every single game, you're going to win a lot of ball games. You're going to be really good. And so, again, it's behind closed doors for the most part here. We're kind of taking Kalen DeBoer's word for it. But to call Jalen Milroe consistent in a new offense that is going to be, in my opinion, a little bit more pass-happy, pass-centric, I think that's a good sign. We'll see how it develops. Now, tell you what, I can't wait for the A-Day because with Jalen Milroe being non-contact, we're going to see him isolated as a passer in Kalen DeBoer's offense. How consistent is he? How comfortable is he? Does he go to the right place with the football? Is he throwing the football consistently in the right place? And I mean right place, like right spot on the body. We got man coverage running over the top, or we throwing it back shoulder? We got a guy tailing behind, or we putting it out in front where only our guy can get it? Very excited to watch that. The other buzz is they are operating like he's the guy. Some of y'all in Alabama said, no, duh, of course he's the guy. I just think it's worth addressing that that's how they're going about it right now, but can't wait to see how this thing develops. At the wide receiver position, Jeremy Bernard, transfer from Washington, was with Kalen DeBoer, and he's, from what we can tell, the most comfortable in that offense. This makes sense, right? He's familiar with the staff for the most part. He's familiar with Kalen DeBoer's standard and way of doing things. He's hitting the ground running. He's doing well. Kobe Prentice now, this is why we think social media is so important to pay attention to in this time of the year in the college football world. Kobe Prentice, a little bit of sticky fingers on display the other day. Just a snippet from practice, little highlight. But Kobe Prentice goes full just oven mitts, snags it behind him with one hand, doesn't break stride, keeps on going. And just a practice clip, I understand it, but nonetheless, it was impressive. And from what we can tell, that clip is right in line with what is being said about Kobe Prentice. He's been generating a lot of buzz. He's been really impressive. Don't be surprised if he ends up being in that wide receiver one conversation when it comes to what they do in the fall. Just saying, don't be surprised if he's in that conversation. I don't know if he'll be that guy, but so far so good for that wide receiver room. That's massive because we understand now for Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix Jr. was the catalyst for that offense last year, right? I mean, he was pretty much putting the ball wherever he felt like last season. But at the exact same time, like, you don't have the success Washington had last year if you don't have some absolute dogs in the perimeter. Like Rome Odunze is about to get a check with a lot of zeros next to it because of how successful he was in that offense last year, because how consistently he won his matchup and made plays. So it's a two-part system. Jalen Milroe's got to throw the ball to the right spot and be consistent doing it, but you got to have some dudes that can make you pay on the perimeter if you don't give them the proper attention when playing against Alabama's offense. So that's the latest out of that wide receiver room. Defensively, I always try and tread lightly when it comes to my opinion on defenses during the spring, because part of you is trying to just be a good teammate during spring practice. Like, if I come across the middle as wide receiver and I got a clean shot as a safety, I might not take his head off like I would if it were the opposition and we're playing any given SEC team on a fall Saturday. Like, the tempo might be a little bit different. Also, how coaches do it during spring practices, sometimes you'll go a thud tempo, which means just wrapping up. Sometimes it's just tagging off. The bottom line here is Alabama defensively is still a work in progress, which with the new staff you would expect. The secondary is still developing. Okay, so some young cats, Red Morgan and Zabian Brown, were names that I've heard are making some strides out there. That's a good sign that you got the young bucks getting after it, a little bit of action there. They feel good about their pass rush. The big thing with this defense, which I want us to be all aligned on, they lost 3/4 of that production that contributed to last year's SEC title. Okay, so a lot of new faces. New faces means an acclimation process. And oh, by the way, you sprinkle in the fact that it's a brand new staff, brand new system than what a lot of these guys are used to. So what I would say with Alabama, give it some time. Let's not overreact from what we see in the spring game. Let's not overreact from the first month of the season. Let's give it some time to find its footing. And I think overall that defense will eventually find a version of what they expect in Tuscaloosa. But again, it's a process. Let's hold our opinions very loosely of what they're doing in Tuscaloosa, especially during the spring. But that's the latest right there. Now, I'm always curious when we talk to our guys about spring ball, what the unquantifiables are. Like, I always ask, hey, what's the temperature? What's the feel right now around spring practice? And you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 different answers. But the sentiment that I was told when it comes to how Alabama feels right now during spring ball is there's a lot of eagerness within that locker room. A lot of guys transferred out. A lot of guys gone for the NFL draft. But the guys that are still in that locker room in Tuscaloosa, They've heard all that's been said. They've heard about, hey, Nick Saban's not here anymore. Watch Alabama fall off a cliff. Alabama's not going to be Alabama anymore. There's a lot of guys that are like, okay, heard you. Cool. That's how you feel. That's fine. But we're going to go make sure that we prove a point when it's time for those pads to pop and games to actually be played. You can say what you want. You can talk all you want. But guess what? Talk is cheap, and talk doesn't win football games. And so I think they're very eager, kind of similar to how they felt after that Texas game last year. It's a chip on the shoulder. There's a little bit of doubt baked in the public opinion. They don't care. They do not care in Tuscaloosa, and I think that's a healthy place to be from a temperature perspective right now if you're an Alabama football player, an Alabama Crimson Tide fan. So we'll see what happens there, but that's the latest right now when it comes to spring practice. Believe they have another scrimmage here this weekend in Tuscaloosa, so keep it locked right here. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll tell you everything you need to know when it comes to spring ball at Alabama, but if you want to get dialed into the nth degree, Bama Online, the place to get a membership. Again, Alabama's On3 site. All right, so everyone tuned in live, of course, we appreciate y'all. Hey, if you're listening on podcast, we love y'all, man. We're glad to have y'all a part of this. We're grateful to have y'all dialed in with us right now. Let's move on here to one of my favorite segments that we'll do, and we'll try and do this as frequently as we can during the week. I always put out the call to action on my Twitter. Excuse me. Always put out the call to action on my Twitter. What is your most unpopular college football take that you strongly believe in? And when I say most unpopular, like you fire it off in the group chat, you talk about it with your friends, and you know, like, hey, I'm going to get some pushback. But it's like that GIF. I've heard different things around GIF and GIF, but I digress. It's like that GIF where the dude, swings his sword and he's got the whole cavalry coming at him. Like, it's just, hey, I'm standing on this. I'm standing on business. This is how I feel. And Josh got at us on Twitter, and he says, Georgia is not a blue blood. That's Josh's opinion, and we're going to talk about it right now. But first things first, make sure you're subscribed. We do a live show. If you're watching on the live show right now, hey, we love y'all. We're glad to have y'all a part of this college football community. We are extremely grateful, and don't take that for granted. If you're watching as a one-off video, we're also grateful for you. But make sure you're subscribed. Just double-check that you're subscribed so you don't miss anything we got going right here on this show, on this platform. All right, so we appreciate y'all for that. So, again, Josh's take is that Georgia is not a blue blood. To answer this question or to answer this take adequately, I think we need to unpack how you define blue blood. For me, a couple of factors I run the blue blood status through. The first is, are they foundational to the history of college football? And baked into that is, have they stayed foundational to college football? Like, have they stayed a massive part of the game in the long run? The other part of this, I think there's a close your eye test that you have to address when it comes to Georgia, or when it comes to a blue blood period. What I mean by that is, when you close your eyes and I say college football, what logo do you see in your mind's eye? What logo pops up in your brain when I tell you college football? I think those are two good tests to kind of try and nail down who is a blue blood in college football. Now, I think it's also important for us to look at the success, right? Like, the question linked to the blue blood conversation, the next question that you're going to ask is, well, how'd they do on the field? Well, are they winning? What's the success level there for Georgia? What's the success level for this team that we're going to go ahead and call a blue blood? And when you do that, I think there is, you look at the history, and the top 5 winningest teams of all time are as follows. Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Texas are tied for 4th, and I think you have Oklahoma at 5 or 6, however you want to slice that. Georgia's at number 11. Okay, so if you don't factor in Yale and Harvard, they're in the top 10, but Yale and Harvard are 2 of the winningest teams of all time, which I don't have anything nice to say about those teams, so I'll keep on moving on. But I do think that the era you're in college football and your success recently should have something to do with your blue blood status. Like, I think there can be blue bloods of different eras, if that makes sense. Like, Miami is 68th all time in wins. But I think a lot of folks would make the case for them being a blue blood based on what they did during their run in the 80s, or at least in that seasons, in that era, in that decade of the 80s. I think a lot of people would say Miami was a blue blood. I think you say a lot about Nebraska being a blue blood right now. They're right now on a pretty difficult bowl drought, but even with that being said, they're, one of the winningest teams of all time. I believe they're in the top 10. They got 3 national titles in the 90s. Is Nebraska a blue blood? You have different arguments around both those teams. I'm not here to tell you those teams are blue bloods or not. I'm just giving you the conversation. You could argue that Clemson was nearing blue blood territory. Now, historically, probably not the case, but in the college football playoff era, they had 6 straight college football playoff appearances. Okay, so does that factor in? I think when you talk about Georgia, I'm going to give you just an answer from my opinion right now. I think Georgia, the way they've won and the way that I view college football, which again, I don't want to say biases because that sounds like we're being biased, but I think there is a filter you run it through from your upbringing when it comes to how you view blue bloods. I think Georgia is a blue blood right now, but if you don't, that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion. I'll say this, though. I think whether you think they're a blue blood or not right now, I think that they're about to be very firmly a blue blood based on what's about to happen here in the next 10-plus years or so. Because say what you want about Georgia, historically, as long as Kirby Smart is running the show, they're going to acquire top talent, and they're going to get the best out of that top talent. So, I'm going to say this. I think Georgia's about to be the team of the 20s. I really do. The 2020s and on, I think Georgia's going to be a team that wins even more national championships than they already have this decade. I think Kirby Smart is going to continue to add top guys. And the reason why it's important that they recruit so well and they develop so well is because the pushback you'll get when it comes to this next era of college football with NIL and the portal, folks can be very quick to say, well, that's going to kind of put an end to the Georgia run, right? That's why they're going to kind of fall off in the future. I hear where you're coming from, and I've said this multiple times. Georgia probably will lose a 5-star they would have gotten, maybe 2 5-stars they would have gotten. They probably are going to spread the wealth a little bit more across the college football landscape. There might be a team that just goes all in on a kid from an NIL perspective and is able to outbid Georgia for a certain kid. And that's not me throwing shade. That's just a matter of fact. We understand that's a very major factor in the college football world right now. But I think when you look at Georgia, elite competitors, they want to be developed, and they want to win. Georgia, with how they've done in the NFL draft with 55 draft picks, 15 first-round picks, as we stand here right now for Kirby Smart, that's attractive. The national championships they've won, that's attractive. And I think elite competitors are what it takes to win long-term when it comes to college football. So this is not me saying anything negative about NIL. This is not me saying the NIL facet of college football is a bad thing. In fact, I've said the opposite here for a long time. But the NIL lane is just another tool for Kirby Smart to be successful, I think. Because when they get on campus and you buy into the way that Georgia does things, you will reach your potential. You can't say the same for everyone else across college football. NIL is just a way to get better raw ingredients. What you do with those ingredients, how you develop them, how you're successful with them, that's what matters long term. That's what adds up to winning football games. And so I say all those things to kind of bring home this point. Georgia, just because the styles in college football are changing with acquiring talent, just because the eras are changing, I think Georgia's going to be consistent as long as Kirby Smart is the head coach there. So are they a blue blood right now? I would say yes. If you push back, I understand it's your opinion, but I would say that when we look to the next 10 years, look to the next 20 years, I think Georgia will have very firmly cemented themselves, going back to our tests here, as a foundational piece to college football as a game, historically and moving forward. And then when you close your eyes and think college football, whether it be recency bias or whether it be long-term teams that are up there with some of the winningest programs in the country, Georgia will move up that list. And I think Georgia will be a logo that flashes in a lot of minds in that regard. So we would say Georgia is a blue blood, but if not, I think it's a matter of time before they start to leave little doubt to that discussion. But again, Josh, we appreciate you bringing the juice, brother. We appreciate you bringing the unpopular take to the show. That's what makes this whole thing go, man. How recruiting is the lifeblood of college football, y'all, the community, are the lifeblood of this show. So for that, we're very grateful, we're very thankful, and we do not take that for granted for a second. So with that being said, let's move right on to the lifeblood of this live show, man, which is y'all in the live chat. So if you're in the live chat right now, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it sincerely. Helps us do more of what you want to see. The man running the entire operation here behind the curtain, Nick Brake. Nick, what's up, baby? What's going on in the live chat today?
Nothing really. People are just kind of hanging out today.
Okay.
It was all about Texas earlier. Then we started getting some Jalen Milroe talk, but it's not been terribly hostile today. OG Gary asked a question. I'm going to see if you can make a little sense of it. I'm kind of not totally sure what he means.
I love it. Let's
Says, JD, let's look at the other side of the coin. What do you think will make a lackluster season? Do you think a as-expected outcome results in a dissatisfying season, especially with all the hype? What do you think?
An as-expected season, does it make it lackluster? That's a good question. I think that really is one of those things where it's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like if you were looking at the 12-team playoff and hoping that you get a G5 champ, I say, hey, I would maybe try and temper expectations a little bit there. I really think that right now as we expand the playoff, we're going to get more as-expected results than we have ever before. And one of the reasons why is something Kirby Smart hit on and something that Jesse Simonton talked about in his article. You are now giving the superpowers a mulligan. And so what I mean by that is Georgia, when they previously lost a game, we didn't usually see them lose another one until they got to, their national championship game or until they got to a spot in the playoff. Like the bottom line here is it's going to take a lot more to take these teams down. And I think the Georgias, the Texas, the Ohio States, like those teams that are so talented and you give them a chance to figure out what they did wrong, correct it in film, give them an edge to them, kind of wake them up a little bit, give them some smelling salts to get back on track. I think that's dangerous, and I think that's going to ultimately make it really difficult to take down some of these teams. Like, I'll rewind the tape to last year with Georgia. I hate to keep going back to Georgia because I think some folks are not fans of that specific team here in the chat, but like Georgia in a 4-team playoff last year, if they were healthy, I would have picked them to win the whole deal. Like in a 12-team playoff, Tennessee a couple of years ago. I don't know you pick them to win the whole deal, but I definitely don't want to see them that first round after they lost that game against South Carolina. And if Hendon Hooker was, I understand he was hurt for that entire season, so maybe it's a moot point. But like the bottom line here is teams having more time to get healthy, being able to refocus after a loss, erase complacency. That's dangerous for how talented these rosters are. So a long answer, but I don't think it waters down the season. I think it is fair, though, to maybe temper expectations that we're going to see like these Cinderella kind of runs.
Okay. The Truth, JD, says, who are the 4 most underrated college football coaches of all time, in your opinion?
Of all time. Of all time, man.
Underrated.
It's tough to go underrated of all time. Let's go underrated currently.
Okay.
I think James Franklin's underrated. I understand he's been third place in the Big Ten, and he gets a lot of smoke for not beating Ohio State and Michigan, but the dude wins ball games. Dude absolutely wins ball games. So we'll go with James Franklin's on that list. Listen, maybe we're given a recency bias because we were able to be out there recently. I think Hugh Freeze is underrated. I think what he's got cooking out there at Auburn is got tremendous clarity. There's tremendous direction, both culturally and from a talent acquisition standpoint at Auburn. I think he's underrated. I would also argue that who was I going to say? Oh, Josh Heupel. I think he's underrated. I think he, in what he's building at Tennessee, is going to be a massive, massive factor long-term in the SEC picture. And then when we talk about other underrated coaches, man, who else would you add to that list? Man, underrated. I think when you look at the Big 12, there's a lot of guys you could argue are underrated. I think Chris Kleiman's underrated. I think Lance Leipold's underrated. I think Gus Malzahn might be a little bit underrated too, what they're doing at UCF. So that's more than 4, but I think those guys, especially in that Big 12 region, or Big 12 conference rather, I think they probably deserve a little bit more juice than what they're getting, just because the logo doesn't have the same shine to it as a team in the SEC or the Big Ten. I would still say those teams or those coaches rather fit the underrated criteria for me personally.
Yep. No shocker, OG Gary says Kyle Whittingham.
Kyle Whittingham. See, he might not even be underrated anymore.
I don't think so anymore.
I think he's a top 10 coach in the game, man.
Yep.
I really do.
Ferris says, do you think a traditional Big Ten team like Iowa, Wisconsin, or Penn State can, in quotes, take over the Rose Bowl or the Coliseum in the fall? They travel very, very well in those de facto home games. Could those be de facto home games for them? Hey, it's a new thing. They've never gone out west for conference games, so
it absolutely could. Here's the big thing: if USC or UCLA, I guess, yeah, because they mentioned the Coliseum and the Rose Bowl. If USC or UCLA is competitive, that's going to determine the whole thing. Because we hear this a lot with LA and their college teams, but like, if you're not winning, they've got other stuff to do. Like, there's other things that you can do in Los Angeles. You can go to the beach. You can go see the Hollywood sign. You can go be around movie stars. Like, there's a lot of other things pulling at your attention in Southern California if you're not the show. So I think we saw that with USC and how they kind of tapered down a little bit this past season, how they did from the year prior when Caleb Williams won the Heisman. But, yeah, bottom line, I would say it all depends on how hot of a run those teams are on, both UCLA and USC. So that's kind of my take on it. What do you say? One more, Nick? I know we've been going long here. So what do you say for one more from the chat?
One more. If we didn't get to it today, come back tomorrow. I'm going to go in order who asked it first today. Out of fairness, it's Jared Stidham. Says, what position group on which team makes you most excited in 2024?
Ooh, position group on the team. How about Jared Stidham? He's got a lot of things going on. He was at Baylor, then he was at Auburn. Now he's a quarterback in the NFL. Still making time to watch the show, you know? Position group that gets me most excited. I think the obvious answer you would say is Ohio State because of Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Like, I think that's a pretty fair conversation to have. I keep thinking of wide receiver rooms, man. I think Tennessee and their wide receiver room with Mike Matthews, with Squirrel White, with Brew McCoy healthy, with Dante Thornton getting another year under his belt and hopefully getting healthy. Tulane, Chris Brazel's coming over there. Like, I think they're going to be explosive with Nico throwing the ball. Like, that's one of those teams where if that receiver group can consistently win their matchup, that offense is built to score a lot, and I think Nico's going to be able to equip them to score a lot. So I'll go ahead and say the Tennessee wide receiver room just by nature of all the potential they got cooked in there.
Okay.
Good stuff. Nick, anything else? We got any break takes to finish off the show?
I do not.
Kickball
not
today?
Canceled. So it'll be a while before I get back on the field. So
we hitting the cages? We going out there and swinging the leg a little bit and just getting – you ever kick medicine balls? What about that?
So. No, that's a good way to break your toe or your ankle, but no, I'll probably take it easy tonight. You
just callus the ankle, so you break it enough times, you just got a titanium ankle, titanium toe, you know?
Yeah, we'll see about that one. That doesn't seem like a great idea, but maybe I'll try it tonight. Maybe I'll try to kick a bowling ball.
We can chop it up off air and figure out how to get that done.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Good stuff. Nick, appreciate you, brother. Nick Brick making the whole thing go. We appreciate y'all being tuned in, man. Subscribe on your way out. Got a lot of things cooking. So important to be subscribed here and important to be following on the social channels at JD Pickell, Twitter and Instagram. Again, we are extremely thankful, extremely grateful for y'all making this show what it is. I'd like to think we got our little college football community here and it's continuing to grow, and it is growing because of y'all. So we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We'll see y'all tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern. Love y'all. We'll see y'all next time.